Welcome to this new dialogue of the International Academy of Information Studies. We have invited Roger Koppl. He is a professor of finance in the Whitman School of Management of Syracuse University in New York and faculty fellow at the University of Forensic and National Security Science Institute. He has been in several faculties, Copenhagen, Harvard, Fairleigh Dickinson, quite a brilliant curriculum. Also visiting in New York University, George Mason, University of Vassar, Max Planck. So you have been in between the US and Europe. And you are past president of the Society for the Development of Western Economics and a former editor of an economic journal of Austria. You have published 12 books, 170 papers, according to Google.
I think the book, I believe the paper count. I think the book count is 4 now. I'm not sure what the paper count is.
Yeah, but well, your research interests include the economic theory of expert, the theory of economic growth, complexity theory, the distribution of knowledge of society. Your work on expert failure in forensic science has been featured in very prestigious magazines and journals, Forbes, Washington Post, The Atlantic, The Huffington Post, etc., etc. And well, just to go to the matter, I have prepared okay. Do you see my?
I do.
Okay. Well, I have distinguished between the social obtention of knowledge in society, the production of scientific content, and the difference with social application in the togetherness of real-world problems.
Hello, can you put in full screen?
Yeah, full screen, yeah. This?
Right now. Yes, thank you.
Well, because the science are usually, almost always, specialized and within some clear-cut boundaries. But the social application is the togetherness of real-world problems. And then the system of obtention of knowledge is an ecosystem very well framed, research institutions, universities, academies, publication archives, while in the application of knowledge, it is basically pragmatic perspectives. It is the muddy world of experts and few approaches in philosophy, cognitive science, and economy about this application of the world of knowledge application. And I have listed a few modern classics. Jose Ortega y Gasset on his famous essay on the barbarism of specialization. Alfred North Whitehead, particularly Science in the Modern World. Charles Percy Snow with his Rebel lecture on the two cultures. And I have added James Scott because it's like seeing like a state. And I think this is almost anthropology and political philosophy, but he is very good and he deals with some aspects, I'm sure, of what the world of experts that Roger will talk. And then these three are very conventional: Thomas Malone, James Surowiecki, Alexander Penland. And I have written classics of economic thought taken from the very cover of the book of Expert Failure of Roger. And then I was questioning, what about AI? Well, I was talking with Jorge and he prepared for me a presentation, but just almost automatically. And then this is Expert Failure, a presentation of the book by Roger Koppl, done by an AI system. I think it was ChatGPT. And then it was the first slide, this is the second slide. Well, why do entire systems fail? And then the cracks, limited knowledge, perverse incentives, and knowledge monopoly. And then the presentation was pretty long, but I will stop here because concentrated power creates concentrated risk. And then this cracking tower, do you see the little golden T at the top? This was my only addition to this presentation. And it means, I think, it is quite symbolic of what's happening now. I think everyone will understand what this means, this golden T in the tower. Or there are others, but, and I think I can stop here. I can stop here, I will close, and that's it, huh? Roger?
Okay, thank you for that introduction.
Okay.
I think ChatGTP may understand my theory better than I do. That's a possibility. Do you see my screen now, the slide? Oops. I'm trying to share screen. Here we go. And that's what I want. And there we go. How's that? You see that now? Very good. Okay. So here we are. Expert failure before and after AI. Thank you all for that, again, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you all for being here. Let me talk, I guess, first about the so-called information choice theory, basically my theory of expert failure, and then we'll see what that might imply for AI. So I call my theory of experts information choice theory as kind of homage to this group of people, the figure on the right being my dissertation advisor, Leland Yeager. These were the original creators of public choice theory, which later earned James Buchanan, the third figure there from the left, a Nobel Prize. Many of us think Gordon Tullock should have shared in the prize. And for doing related but distinct work, Ronald Coase there on the extreme left also got a prize. So there they are in 1962 in University of Virginia. And I'm calling they had the theory of public choice, where they said, let's take the basic economic view of a human agent and apply it to political choices, to so-called public choice. Well, so it is with experts. Let us take the basic view of human action that we find in economics and apply it to the question of expertise. The expert chooses what information to share with the client, with the non-expert. So this is the basic Virginia political economy view, that experts respond to incentives. And here's a wonderful example. Let's see if this works. This should work. Come on. There we go.
As I said,
Oh, forgive me. I failed to indicate. This is Graham Medley. He was the head of modeling for SAGE, which was the primary scientific advisory body to the British government during the COVID crisis. And this is kind of an ex post. Gee, it seems like he exaggerated the risks and stuff here and there. What about that?
in the way, the kind of the position that we have is that the worst thing for me as the chair of the committee would be for the government to say, why didn't you tell us it could be that bad? Yeah. So inevitably, we're always going to have a worst case, which is above reality.
So that's an expert explaining what his incentives were and how he responded to them. There we go. So information choice theory then yields up a theory of expert failure, which indeed that's the central benefit of having a theory of information choice. It gives you a theory of expert failure. And by expert failure, what I mean is false or otherwise bad opinion or expert advice. Truth isn't the only criterion. Just think of, like, in statistics, maybe you want to have a biased estimator because it has a lower mean squared error. Okay? So in some sense, you're deviating from truth tracking, but for sort of good epistemic reasons. So I leave what constitutes expert failure a little bit open-ended, although the the sort of primal case is saying something that is false when you're supposed to say something that's true. And then the original application for me was forensic science. There's a lot of errors in forensic science, much more than you would anticipate till you kind of start to study it. But also public health, scientific advisory committees, monetary policy, the whole issue of misinformation and disinformation, which was also a big issue during the COVID era, and on and on and on. Quite an long and indefinite list of applications. Now, a surprising and important contribution of my theory of experts is the definition of an expert as anyone paid for their opinion. Okay. Which is contrary to the more common definition of the expert as one with expertise. Okay. No, that's not how, in my view, that's not how we should ought to define the expert. Rather, it's anyone paid for their opinion. After all, we all occupy different places in the division of labor and therefore different positions in the division of knowledge. Every one of us has specialized expertise in their sort of own little corner of the world. Okay. So the defining experts by their expertise means that everybody and nobody's an expert. That's not a definition, in my humble opinion, not a satisfactory one. And defining experts in the way I do spares us the necessity of trying to distinguish, true experts from charlatans, because then you're just comparing your own opinions to those of so-called experts, and if they disagree, you say, oh, they're charlatans. So that's not really helpful. Instead, we focus on the contractual role of the expert in the economic system. I think that's in some way a surprising advance. So what are experts like then in this view of things? Can we peel away the curtain as Toto does to reveal the Wizard of Oz? Well, here's what many of us try to think. We like to think the expert is some sort of a guardian angel who will guide us. So we just throw ourselves into the arms of the expert and trust. Others, however, populists included often, repudiate experts and view them as demons or perhaps as fools. Okay? I think we need to view experts not as angels, not as devils, not as fools, not as wise men, but as humans such as thee and me. Okay? And our key behavioral assumptions about these human beings are nothing special about experts. Experts, I say, seek to maximize utility. You don't always get there. So they're not always seeking truth. And then I have a bounded rationality assumption, although that phrase bounded rationality has connotations that are inappropriate to my perspective. So I say that expert cognition is limited and erring, and we make mistakes. And we're not the experts are not smarter than other folks. And then this third assumption is very important and a little bit puzzling. Incentives skew the distribution of errors, even honest errors. But if you think about it for a minute, you kind of see what's going on with that. In fact, look, just today I was reading David Reich's book on ancient DNA, whose title, forgive me, I'm forgetting. Who We Are and How We Got Here, I believe, is the title of his book. And he says in this book, this important scientist does ancient DNA analysis of our ancient archaic human ancestors. And he says at a certain point in the book, we did this study and we got this result, and that was surprising to us. We didn't expect that result. Therefore, we checked our database, we did this thing, we did that thing, we did all these kind of things that we wouldn't otherwise have done because we got a result that we didn't expect. So this means there's an asymmetry in your response to the evidence if it conforms, gives you the answer that you want or that you expect, versus if it doesn't. Okay? Well, okay, but that induces a bias in your analyses. Okay, and this is just commonplace, so commonplace that David Reich explains this without a shrug of the shoulders, without apology, not recognizing that he's and he would be mortified to think that he was introducing a bias into his work. So that sort of episode from science illustrates how it is that even honest errors are skewed, okay, by incentives. So here's the core of the theory of expert failure. Lots of causes for expert failure, including complexity and so on. But the real nub of it is right here. You have to ask yourself two questions. who decides? Is it the expert deciding for the non-expert, or does the non-expert decide based perhaps on expert advice? Giving the expert the power of choice, in my view, increases the chances of expert failure. The other question you have to ask, the second issue, is does the expert have monopoly power, or in some good sense, is the expert competitive? The poor innocent word competitive or competition has many meanings, so there's a problem about what really you mean by that. But in some good sense, is the expert in competition with other experts? If so, that's going to lower the chance of expert failure. So you have your highest chance of expert failure when you have monopoly experts deciding for others, as with, for example, state-administered eugenics programs or the central planning of an old Soviet-style economy, or let's say the monetary policy of a central bank in pretty much any quarter of the world today. So, in this view, experts are not benevolent. I'm sorry. So the groovy thing, from my point of view, the thing that we desire or should desire, is self-rule or autonomy, whereby people freely seek the advice from competitive experts. And my example is the American publication Consumer Reports, that tells you what's a better and worse toaster, what's a better and worse lawnmower, and so on. It turned out to be highly reliable, this group, which is consistent with my view that self-rule or autonomy gives you the lowest chance of expert failure. Okay, so in this view, experts are not benevolent dictators. They're just fallible people operating from within an institutional frame that gives you certain incentives and certain knowledge flows, both of which matter. So the bad things are like monopoly. You don't want that expert to have monopoly power. And monopsony. The Federal Reserve System, the central bank of the United States, has a lot of monopsony power. It's like almost the only purchaser of macroeconomic advice in North America, and that skews the advice produced and the kind of macroeconomic theory that's done. So monopsony and monopoly both are bad in my judgment. Good things are epistemic pluralism, where you got multiple experts with diverse views from different disciplines, and some kind of contestation whereby you have competition among the experts, disciplined perhaps by so-called red teaming, where you have, devil's advocates trying to argue the opposite point of view before some team of experts issues any kind of report or finding. Right within the group, they try to, criticize their own results. Okay, so that's a very quick overview of the theory of expert failure, revealing it to be, in my humble opinion, a structural problem. It's not that, experts have to be better people or something like that, or well-trained or something like that. We want experts to be good people and well-trained, but the key is the sort of the market form, the structural problem, the institutional setting in which the expert is embedded. Well, I think AI failure is also a structural problem, quite parallel to the problems of expert failure. So, LLMs are like experts, paid for their opinions. There's an issue. The LLM is not paid for its opinion, but it's owned by an entity that's earning its revenue from these LLMs. So they're like experts paid for their opinions. They are heterogeneous, one, Grok versus ChatGTP. They hallucinate, they make mistakes. So a lot of similarities here to humans and to experts and the market for experts. So I think AI failure, the risks and the errors and hallucinations and problems, AI failure is a governance problem. It's not really a technical problem. At some level, yes, it's a technical problem. What's the right criterion by which to, judge the LLM during training, bits per byte or whatever these things are. So it's not that the technical problems are absent, but sort of underneath and more fundamental in some way than the technical problems, which are to be solved by the technicians, who are very important to the process, of course, and by the different companies who own the different LLMs. Of course, that's very important. But for those of us who are not within those contexts, the more fundamental thing is the governance problem. Okay, so we need good governance of AI. In many heads, that's, oh yeah, we need to regulate AI. Absolutely, we've got to regulate AI. Well, I don't think so. I think it's an error to think that somehow the solution is quote unquote regulation. I put regulation consistently in scare quotes because when people speak of regulation, what they generally mean is that some sort of impaneled body of governmental experts should make ex ante decisions for the market. You can do this, you can't do that, you must meet this performance criteria, things like that. But our vocabularies would almost suggest that every market is without regulation, or that we could have such a thing, as a market that's unregulated without these impaneled governmental regulatory bodies. But that's not really true. Every market is regulated. Just try, if you will, to imagine some sort of utterly unregulated Wild West market, where anybody can do anything. Well, yeah, but wait a minute. I'm not sure quite what that even means, but let me go with it. Imagine such a market. Somehow it's the Wild West, no regulation. Well, wait a minute, okay. But if a vendor should cheat their customers, well, if it's also open, there's no governance here, there's no government here, it's all some kind of Wild West, well, okay, the cheated customer may wreak vengeance on the vendor. That's a form of regulation. Fear of such vengeance may discipline the vendor to be more straightforward in dealing with their potential customers. There's no such thing as an unregulated market, but I know that when people say regulation, this is what they mean. Some kind of top-down governmental body that's making decisions ahead of the case for constraining the actors within the market. Well, in that sense, I think regulation of artificial intelligence is, well, I'm saying boldly here, impossible. Certainly it's very difficult. A great difficulty is the speed of adaptation. The technology here is changing rapidly. The rate of change is increasing, and legislation and legislative and governmental bodies and regulatory bodies, they adapt more slowly. This is an old point in economics. A monetary theorist named Ed Kane made this point, over 40 years ago in a beautiful paper on the regulatory dialectics, where one of his examples was toasters. In America, we had limits on what interest rate you could pay to your banking customers, your depositors, but banks would have offers like, open an account with us and get a free toaster. Well, that toaster is a substitute for an interest payment, so it's a workaround against the regulation trying to limit interest rates. So that very humble and unimportant but vivid example illustrates how it is that the regulated party is typically more adapts more rapidly than can the regulating party. So that's a big problem, this relative speeds of adaptation. And again, the rate of change in AI is just breathtaking today. And in general, I think it's very difficult. The consequences of regulations are hard to know. So it's very difficult to anticipate the consequences of regulation just because of the complexity of the system. And then, if we regulate the system, we'll in this top-down sense that people usually intend, then good innovations will be foregone. Bad innovations may be induced, such as the toaster example, innovating by giving away toasters when someone opens a bank account. And also for AI, very importantly, is the Gödel-Turing problems, illustrated by Rice's theorem. Rice's theorem is just sort of pure math result from about, 1952, I believe, from the 50s, which when you sort of translate it into the context of digital computers, it says that you can't, there's no performative characteristic of a program that you can reliably predict. That is to say, in general, it is undecidable whether a given program is going to have this or that performance characteristic. So you can't have a universal virus program, for example. Okay? And this actually, if I may indulge myself just a little bit, this we've seen already in a famous movie scene here. Do you see the screen?
We see only your first slides.
Oh, that's a shame. All right, but did you hear that was the scene from that famous movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey? And oh, there we go. And I'm so sorry you didn't see the image. It was fun. And the famous scene where the astronauts can't get back into the spaceship. Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal. Hal being the computer assistant in the program in the spaceship. Okay, and Hal says, "Sorry, Dave, can't do that." So that's a sort of that's a very old example, actually, from 1969, of the problem that Rice's theorem identifies. You can't really predict what that program is going to do. Okay, so regulation is sort of impossible, and there's further problems. The locus of knowledge, the relevant knowledge, is mostly with the firms or entities being regulated and not with the governmental regulators. Okay. And then there's expert failure among the regulators, because after all, the regulators will have monopoly power, and they're choosing for others the precise conditions that maximize the chance of expert failure, and leaving you without the requisite epistemic pluralism for a sort of epistemically robust system. No epistemic pluralism, that's a very vital point here. Okay, and then very quickly, there's also regulatory capture. I think many of us are familiar with the idea of a revolving door. I'm a regulatory official within the government. Then I work for the industry. Then I go back into the government, and there's this sort of revolving door, so that the interests of the governed and the governing are aligned and not aligned in favor of the consumers as whom they pretend to serve. And more generally, you may have a small number of interested actors influencing regulators and regulations. Okay? And the characteristic form, the most, but not unique, but the most characteristic form of such interested regulation serving the regulators rather than the people is regulations that impose costs on startups and smaller competitors. Compliance costs can be brutal, in fact, can be prohibitive for small and enterprises and startups. Okay, so that's a very quick look at regulatory capture. The point is the regulatory body is supposed to be serving the people, but it is captured by the economic interests that is supposed to be actually constraining and regulating. That's a classic and vital problem for any regulatory context, including for AI, which is why you see, the tech leaders talking about, the dangers of AI and we need regulation. They're not being somehow, open-minded and with an open heart about the dangers that their own products represent. They're trying to find ways to impose costs on competitors so that they maintain their monopoly positions. So a crucial axis in this whole discussion is ex ante versus ex post. Regulation, as is commonly conceived, is an ex ante enterprise. Okay, we've just seen, I've just argued at least, that ex ante regulation of artificial intelligence is impossible, or at least, profoundly, terribly difficult. I think impossible. Tort law, however, is something ex post. If I'm damaged by some, AI program, I may sue the owners. Me or my heirs and assignees may sue the AI company that supposedly has done this damage with their product. So that's ex post. So so that suddenly is sort of more doable, because we can look back better than we can look forward. And in fact, the anticipation, this is very important, the anticipation of tort liability creates an incentive for good behavior, okay? Because you don't want to get that tort liability. And of course, and also very important, what behavior is good will vary across AI providers. One provider leaning on the, going open source, another not, but another provider finding novel testing methods, a third finding ways to use the so-called red teaming that I have mentioned to good effect, and so on and so on and so on. Why should we think that if you have heterogeneous LLMs, there's one size fits all when it comes to performance criteria and other considerations to minimize the risk of harms from AI? Why mightn't the appropriate harm minimizing actions and standards vary from one provider of AI services to another? They will vary. Oops, there we go. So this idea of regulation through torts enables a competitive ecosystem of LLMs and a competitive ecosystem for AI. I've got the word ecosystem underlined there. I think that's very important. It enables digital pluralism. So we have an ecology of LLMs. I think sometimes the thinking is, what's the one way best to do things? No, you need an ecology. Because among other things, you need to leverage diversity. Let each LLM be an epistemic check on all other LLMs. Let each type of AI or each AI provider be an epistemic check on other AI providers. So it's kind of a common sense notion. You should use ChatGPT and Grok, and they are different. Okay? I use actually Claude and Grok, and Claude and Grok are definitely different entities. Well, you should use them both. You should use ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Gemini, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Now, that's very much a common sense approach. You should read, in the UK, you should read the Telegraph and the Guardian. Here in the US, you should read the New York Times and the New York Post. They're very different papers, and you need them both. Or if you prefer the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, very different papers, you need them both. So that's almost just common sense. Your mother probably enjoy, if you have siblings, your mother probably emphasized, now there's two sides to every story. Okay, even if you're an only child, your mother probably told you now there's always at least two sides to every story, and your mom was right. So that is what I have to say on these topics. For the moment, I look forward to hearing Eric's commentary. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Now I need to, I'll stop sharing. There we go.
I'm going to see if I can adjust. There we go. Yeah, quite a talk. The reason somebody's got a microphone on. Okay, good. I was really impressed with your work, your theoretical work, especially on your work on the foundations of the state space possibilities being open and the relationship to information. And you and I think her name is Devereaux wrote an excellent article, which highly impressed me, I must say. So I'm not an expert on experts, so I can't really comment too much about it, but I do agree with you that diversity of opinion and competing one LLM against the other is a good idea. The one thing I would say, though, is that if you view LLMs as having intentional states, then one might be able to regulate them in the sense of constraining the intentions. But it's difficult, it's a conceptual issue of how to define that then theoretically, but it might be possible. And instead of just having top-down regulation, you could have, just like we say, okay, you shouldn't murder someone, okay, that's kind of an intentional restriction on intentional states of the agents. And so LLMs as agents could be similarly restricted through legal means. But I do agree with you, it's the European law may actually hinder competitiveness of their progress. I've got a friend who does work, who actually has a startup in AI. He's moving to a different country from Germany because the regulations are too heavy here. So yeah, so I agree with your whole thesis about competition. The only hesitancy I have is that maybe the competition may get too wild, and we may face somebody using a AI LLM to steer a nuclear weapon or whatever, you know. But anyway, but still, I think I am much more of your opinion than many of the things that you say, so I really can't say I'm totally against what you're saying. Okay. But I would like your comments on this notion of intentionality, information, possibility as the foundations to your theory.
Shall I comment now then? Is that the idea? Okay. Yeah, that's a fabulous idea. I don't think I know what it means, though, to say that an AI program or an LLM has intentional states.
By that I mean, if we define intentional states through the strategic behavior as the strategies that are implemented in them, then we can constrain them by way of the strategic states, where intentionality is then defined more formally in terms of possible strategic states.
Okay, maybe I start to get it. It may be just a program, but it has been programmed, and so it has.
No, I don't mean that it's programmed. I mean more theoretically that it's able to react much like humans do.
Yeah.
When we ask it a question, it has a linguistic strategy to respond, etc., etc.
Well, what I was trying to suggest is it's been programmed to have certain values, goals, missions. I mean, you talk to Claude. I mean, he's a shameless flatterer, Claude. And Grok is not. Grok will give you a catechism, and be utterly unconcerned with logical contradictions in its arguments. Boy, once Grok is giving you that catechism, your job is to obey. So these are different intentional states. That's fabulous. That's wonderful. That requires thought. So I couldn't give you an answer right now that I would defend with a broken bottle at the ramparts, but I feel some doubt about the idea of trying to constrain intentional states. Okay, I think instead that the checks and balances, the competition among LLMs, that's the key. No one of which should therefore have power. So kind of the rough approximation in my head is always power bad, everything else okay.
Yeah, the problem is that way you would be restricting them by way of their owners rather than restricting them by way of their internal capacities. And the owners would not be the right experts in your terminology, because they would be, in some sense, mismanaging their own LLM.
Let me say something. There is a very recent paper by Hector Cenil, and then they deal with the neurodivergent influenceability in agentic AI as a contingent solution to the AI alignment problem. It is another way of considering that. And then their solution is massive ecosystem development. And what they describe, I couldn't read it, but what they describe was continually reminding me the way our digestive tube, the intestines regulate the population of bacteria. They make competition of bacterial species. There are close to 2,000, and some of them are, let's say, noxious species. Others are very, very good, but there is no micromanagement. There are some general control that very lax, very lax by the nervous system, the mesenteric nervous system of the intestinal apparatus, and then there is the immune system, and they establish some let's say some light rewards and light punishments, and then they leave the whole population to move. And it is a fascinating theoretical problem too. There is a lady who has worked a lot on how this can be related to formal tools, to Gödel and to similar theorems, and that's maybe it will be a similar. I think a lot in this kind of solution that was drafting Roger, and maybe we will see more about that. I mean,
I don't know this result. That sounds fabulous. If you'd be kind enough to send me the site, or if you happen to have a digital copy of the paper, I'd be quite keen on seeing that.
Yeah, this is two papers I have here.
And maybe
okay. Yeah,
maybe we can add the site to the notes in the YouTube release of this talk. That's it. It's all about ecology for me. That's kind of the idea in my head. And we need to preserve and cultivate and enable a healthy ecology, rather than trying to decide ex ante for everybody what's the best or proper way to do your AI. Yeah.
yeah. We'll see if we can manage.
When an ecology tries to manage itself, it does implicitly depend on some kind of communication between the different systems. And there we go again into the interacting intentional states of LLMs, which through their interaction may then result in whatever.
But excuse me, don't you think that the main interaction is in between users? Users are like an immune system and the nervous system, and they choose some rewards and some punishments, but in general in a very distributed way. So
the users don't have any influence on the LLM.
Excuse me?
The users don't have any influence on the LLM.
Yeah, no, but they're I mean, it is like an external market around the world of. I mean, I have in mind the intestine example. Then you have a cloud of many complex interactions, but you are outside. The users, we are the intestine cells, the different kind of intestine cells, the immune, the nervous, the cells that absorb the nutrients, and I think this is my modest opinion. I'm not an expert at all, but I was strongly reminded because I was very interested in the microbiome, how it generates stability with so very light controls. It is an unsolvable problem.
It's an ecosystem there, and so I think Eric's point is that those different bacterias, those different bacteria are communicating, interacting, and communicating with one another. And if we go back to human experts, yes, communication across experts is terribly important. So in a common law legal system such as the U.S. and UK, if the experts from each side of a tort case have diametrically opposed interests. Okay? And those diametrically opposed interests create the incentives for all relevant facts, considerations, arguments to emerge. Okay? Or in a business context, say, you're trying to get a good sales forecast, so you call in a consultant. Well, what you really need to do often is have the consultants, but also your internal team that give their reports one in front of the other, and then engage in dialogue with each other and with you, the business manager. Then the business manager is enabled to make a sort of full information choice. So I think it's important that, just what Eric said, that the different programs be put in communication one with another.
Well, actually, you know, when I program, I actually pitch Claude against Grok or whatever. I have them debate each other, and they come up with a nice little interaction. But I mean, the more general point that you're trying to make in terms of regulation, I'm not familiar with this either, how to really do this, but I see the ecological perspective definitely could interface with the communication intention perspective at the theoretical, if not practical level.
You think they're inconsistent? Is that what I heard you just say?
No. I think it could be consistent to have a theoretical background based on intentionality and strategic behavior of LLMs. And I don't know exactly how it would be done, if there would be laws that are imposed, because you can view the legal system as a kind of a constraint-based intentional state of the government.
Yeah.
And then you can see a superposition of the different intentional states, much like, you know, I was telling you about quantum mechanics. You have an interaction between those different systems that result in some kind of behavior that is constrained under some property phi. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think I'm following you. I think that makes sense. It's a deficiency of my presentation. I said you should, you know, use ChatGPT and Grok. I didn't say, as I should have, just what you did a few moments ago, that you should pit ChatGPT against Grok, have them talk to each other through yourself as an intermediary. Yeah. That's fabulous. That should have been in the slide. It wasn't. Yeah. It's actually quite essential in my view.
Well, I would love to ask you though about your paper with Devereaux, because it's so fundamental. It's so interesting. Could you say a few words about that, if possible? Pedro, do we have time for that?
You're muted, Pedro. You're muted. But
Sorry. We have a question.
We ask Krasimir to speak, who's had his hand.
Yeah, please, Krasimir.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry I'm without camera, so you can see me, because now in Bulgaria is holiday and I'm at a different place, not in my office. I want to point that we have two sides, users and experts. And we will speak about experts. The regulations are one kind, and when we speak about users, the regulation need to be another kind. We need to teach users the same way as we teach users of the cars. You need special courses to study how to drive car. So we need to regulate educational system to teach people how to use these knives. They are very dangerous knives, but nobody forbids factories for preparing knives. So the regulation need to be in another side, the side of users. If you use not properly the knife, you will be punished. Thank you.
No, that's a fabulous remark. I mean, do we need the equivalent of a driver's license for AI users? I suspect probably that would be an error. But the idea that national education systems and other entities should be engaged in a kind of education process for the users. Yeah, boy, that sounds pretty reasonable to me. And maybe something stronger is true. I'm somewhat disinclined to the idea of a license, but the idea of training like that is fabulous. Great remark.
Okay, Gordana, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this great presentation. It made many things more clear for me. that I didn't understand before. I would like to think about regulations and laws and the social contract, or the way we align within society in many fields. So it's not only AI that is of interest. That there is also technology which is developing very quickly today, many kinds of technologies. And there are different ways to cope or to solve the problem of very quick development. So it's not only experts. If you look at EU AI Act, the history of the law, it was not only expert, it was broad democratic discussion with many people involved. Even myself, small people everywhere were discussing different aspects of this coming law. And I think we need some kind of law that can follow a very quick technology, be agile, be able to react to a changing world and changing circumstances. So I'm the one who believes that we as civilization need laws. As democracy, we have laws. We have rules. We have laws. We build our societies on laws. But how to do it reasonably? So not to stop technology, but to encourage technology, but in a civilized way. So do you have some comments on that approach? That the laws must be able to be changed as we go. That's my feeling.
Well, I think we can distinguish, and here I'm just following the famous economist F.A. Hayek. I think we can distinguish between law and legislation. So legislation is very sort of flat-footed, okay, and there's a relatively small number of pieces of legislation that will go through a legislative body in any one season, and they are generally ill-considered. The legislators don't read the very laws they vote for. In fact, one of the great services that you may provide to a legislator as a special interest is the service of writing legislation. Okay, so legislation is not something we can do without. I'm not personally an anarchist or not. I am a Democrat in the small d sense. But legislation is quite flat-footed. It's a clumsy instrument, okay? But in the common law countries, the common law is much more adept, agile, okay? Like here in the United States, we have, this kind of ramified court system, so that in one jurisdiction you have one legal rule emerging from the torts, one person suing another. And then in another jurisdiction, you have a different rule. Okay? And that'll go on for a while until and unless somehow those distinct and competing rule systems clash. And then a higher court may have to choose between the two rules, or that a third rule that somehow, So the advantage of this is that it's not planned, it's always built on, ex post problems as they emerge. And each case is settled on the basis of the minute facts of that case. So you get a granularity of response to factual circumstances that the legislator, cannot generally achieve. Okay? And with the multiplicity of courts and multiplicity of jurisdictions, you have this constant updating. Okay? So yes to law, 3 cheers for law, 2 cheers for legislation.
Thank you. But how do you see, for example, autonomous cars? That's the broad field which is developing a lot right now. And it is covered by anything. I don't know, you call it legislations, laws, or whatever. How do you see it?
Well, I mean, that's a great example. If I'm confident enough in my self-driving vehicle to put it out there as a Waymo taxi or whatever the thing is, great. I have a financial interest in that, so I'm going to, have an incentive not to get that one wrong. Okay? And if my self-driving car runs you down, okay, well, that gives grounds. If you survive, that gives grounds for you to sue me. And if you do not survive, your heirs and assignees may sue me. And if it emerges that, oh no, you purposefully leapt in front of the vehicle in order to create a tort or some silly thing like that, of course that's fine. More likely, there's some deficiency in my vehicle, right? And I'm responsible. Okay, so now I have to not only make the correction, but also compensate you or your heirs for the loss. Okay, so I think that's a perfect example, right? Let 100 flowers bloom. Don't have the self-driving, autonomous vehicle board, National Autonomy Vehicle Board, that's going to say what's okay and what's not okay in the way of an autonomous vehicle.
I guess we have it already. Standards and national boards and everything. A lot of ethics is connected to questions of autonomous cars, and a lot of regulations and I know it from engineering side. As a designer or requirement engineering person or software engineer, you are familiar with what is expected from your solution in order to obey all those regulations or laws or recommendations. There is a lot already existing for autonomous cars.
Right, but is that a good thing? I mean, let's see if I can remember how I've heard a wonderful description of how like Tesla and Waymo are different. I guess I won't try to reproduce their differences, but they're different systems. Which is the right system? If we have a regulatory body, okay, then we have pressure for the regulatory body to decide very early on which is the right system and use that. Okay, I would rather allow competing entrepreneurs to put out the systems that they think are good, okay, risking their fortunes on the consequences, okay, and we'll find out. Maybe there's room for 2 or 3 different systems. Maybe one system will supplant another, but in 5, 10, or 20 years, the reverse movement will happen because of some technological change or tweak and so on. I don't want a regulatory, a national regulatory body to make that decision for the market. I want the market to make that decision because that's where the knowledge is.
But I believe that's where we are today. Nobody is regulating how you will make your concrete design or your technical solutions or anything. That's up to you. But you must be safe in advance. Yeah. You must prove that you are safe. Quite a lot of procedures to show that the product you are placing on the market is safe and secure and all those things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're looking with expectancy at me. I'm not sure what further comment I should make.
Yeah, Roger. And in the presentation that ChatGPT made for me, I think it was pretty interesting. Let me try to show here. And that's these are the closed systems. Okay, the conversation was now close to this slide, and then you are arguing for competition, decentralized authority, transparency, build open institutions. I think these principles are very important because even if we approach the political side, the nucleus of political power, we see really a tremendous crisis of diversity, of plurality of voices, methods, accountability structures. And this is a very serious crisis, the whole democratic system, in economic and technological system in several countries, including my own country, Spain, and the US. And then I think this connects quite clearly with the problems of our time. I think this is what you propose. It is a good general strategy, because I think when I was preparing the initial slides, it was clear the science has solved its basic creation problems. I mean, we have a very vast ecosystems, a very enormous competition, different kind of markets, etc. But expert advice has no real scholarly analysis behind it. And then we really need for these hyper complex problems today, we need a new conception of expert advice coupled really with artificial intelligence. I mean, it can help to find the exit to the present corruption of expert advice. For instance, to put examples of my country, I mean, most institutions have been captured. Independent institutions helping to navigate the whole direction of the country have been captured by the government. And it is like in Hungary. I mean, they dictate. And these institutions are doing well. It is not expert advice. It is rubbish. Ideological rubbish. And then there should be some orientation that you have been very fair providing the orientations. Maybe we should some of these orientations could be fine-tuned and developed more, and the coupling with artificial intelligence. Maybe you have provided here, some of you have provided good ideas to develop, and I think maybe we can find this possibility of an ecosystem of thought by artificial intelligence, giving health to the human ecosystem of expert medic world.
Fabulous comments. Thank you. Those wonderful remarks. Far better than my last reply to Gordana, I'm afraid.
I think you kind of didn't really address Gordana's point, namely how these constraints are supposed to work. I mean, she is making the point that we do have to have some kind of safety issue. And as I hear you saying, the extreme adversary would say, well, Koppl is just saying, look, let the accidents happen. The law will take care of it after a while. Okay, so we have a couple of hundred people dead, no problem. They won't be dead after the courts get through with them.
Well, yeah.
But excuse me, this is what happens in the real world. I mean, we are full of accidents, of unintended consequences, and I think we cannot. It is impossible to predict every situation. Every problematic situation cannot be predicted at all. But then there should be some general guidelines, and that's correct. That there should be some general checks on safety, but not in every concern, every possible detail. That's impossible. That would break. It would stop the technological development.
I think the piece that was missing, if Krasimir will forgive me for jumping in quickly before he speaks, I think the piece that was missing from your comment, Eric, was the anticipation of the party that's subject to tort liability. So that brings a kind of foresight into it, okay? That mitigates the risk that you commented on, that you identified correctly, right?
Mm-hmm. The problem is that Europe doesn't have the same kind of tort liability. In America, Europe doesn't have the same kind of tort liability. In America, everybody sues everybody. In Europe, yes. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, in America, what we don't have, that I would like to have, is loser pays, right? So you know, the institutions on both sides of the Atlantic are imperfect.
But if loser pays, then you have the rich being outperforming the poor. So you can't have that either in terms of political fairness.
No, loser pays. So if you sue me for patent infringement, okay, maybe that's a bad example. I'm kind of not a big fan of most forms of intellectual property. But anyway, if you sue me for patent infringement, and you're the big guy and I'm a little guy, okay, well, loser pays. So if I can hire a sufficiently prodigious legal team, okay, to defend me against your onslaught, okay, you're going to have to pay my legal team. Anticipating this, my legal team may take my case, even though my resources are poor and weak. Okay, whereas in the U.S. today, as happened actually to my grandfather, he won the case, the patent infringement case, but was bankrupted thereby, okay, because there was not loser pay. My preference, by the way, for loser pay preceded my knowledge of my grandfather's patent case. So it wasn't special for my family.
Let's go to Krasimir. Krasimir, please.
Okay, thank you. I want to return to Gordana's remark about autonomous cars and to my remark about users. We have two kinds of users. For example, one company may buy autonomous car to provide taxi services in the town. So responsibilities of the company who use cars for serving transport and the end user who will use this car are different. And the education need to be different and control need to be different. If I am end user who use this car, I need at least one special possibility to stop the car if I am afraid that it will be happen to some accident. This is very important for me. Returning to artificial intelligence, we have the same situation. We have producers who prepare artificial intelligence systems. We could not stop this. We could not regulate this. This is market. But in usual life, there are two types of users. I'm expert in artificial intelligence, and I may help end users with my knowledge to solve their problem. My responsibility is absolutely different from the responsibility of producers and responsibilities of end users. I may be a gypsy who may be storyteller for the future, and I may say everything based on artificial intelligence and say this is the whole truth about the God. But you understand that it's very dangerous if I do like this. So our situation with artificial intelligence is very, very complicated. We need to understand what kind of users we have. And for every type of users, we need to think very, very carefully to prepare corresponding laws and rules. For example, I work to prepare a law for space data. European directive, there is such in Bulgaria. I work to implement this directive in Bulgaria. So we see that different users understand in different way one and the same thing. And we may receive very dangerous results. Of course, the positive results are more greater than negative, but it is possible. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have of course, the precise context that you have in mind, Krasimir. I hope I'm not butchering your poor innocent name. But I think we should need to remember that in a sort of open system, in a sort of market system, so-called, whatever that means, in a sort of more open system, there are advisors, again, experts, right? There are advisors. So I don't know what's a good or bad in a toaster, but this Consumer Reports magazine does. Okay, and I read the magazine, I see their review of each different kind of toaster, and decide which one serves me best. Or consider something like automobile safety. That's a hard thing to know about. So there's a case where you would really think, man, what we really need to do is have some sort of government agency to at least rate automobiles for their relative safety. Well, actually, the first guys doing that was in the U.S. Was the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, and they did crash tests of cars. They put the dummy in the car, and this was a non-governmental group of insurers, because they wanted to know what insurance rates to charge for the different cars. Okay, so in an open system where people can sort of freely enter and trade and so on, why the channels, the knowledge flows are different than in a controlled system. The channels for the otherwise naive individual to learn what's reliable, what's safe, what isn't, are multiple and tend to be reasonably, I think, reliable. Okay? Government agency, well, you're depending on that government agency not having been captured, not exhibiting expert failure, not having such a want of epistemic pluralism as to miss possibilities that they should have caught, and so on. Okay, again, it's the ecological point of view. You have an epistemic ecology when you have a more open system.
Thank you.
I was thinking in the possibility of a talk between Hector Fenil, who is working in this AI alignment problem by ecological competition, and then maybe Gordana, you can help me to remind the name. She's in the UK and has Indian ancestors, I think. Do you remember? That she works in the immune system applied to economy, to...
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know, but I don't know.
Okay, but it could be very good. Hector Fenil, this lady, in a more general background, Hector Fenil applied to artificial intelligence, and maybe Roger, you can also participate. We can make
That sounds fun.
a discussion on whether this is a realistic path to explore, or just another scholarly work.
I should probably just throw in a sort of side comment here. Complex problems are complex. So you have to be a little wary of, simple solutions, simplistic solutions. I'll put it like that. Have to be wary of simplistic solutions or slogans or principles that, while perhaps meritorious, do not give you the full sensitivity to particular circumstances that you need in order to have a good outcome in some area. And a very good group of scholars in this regard are the folks around Vincent and Eleanor Ostrom, both of which are unfortunately gone, who made a big fuss out of polycentric governance systems, wherein you would have multiple overlapping competing jurisdictions. And part of this sort of polycentric Ostrom vision is a kind of tiered structure, that there are the lower level units, the intermediate level units, the higher level units. And this actually matters because it warns us not to just sort of burn down the local units and have it all central decision making, or burn down the central unit and have it all local decision making. It sort of admonishes us to recognize the complexity, the diversity in who has what knowledge where and who has what incentive. Okay, and we must, our therapeutic suggestions must be adequate to the tiered complexity of whatever problem it is that we're addressing. So Ostrom. There's other folks besides the Ostroms, but they're a wonderful therapeutic in thinking about such things.
I just have a quick question to you, Roger. What do you? What is your instinct of what's happening with AI? With this, I mean, this is just an amazing speed of this technology. I know we can't predict what new technologies will develop out of it, but obviously new stuff will happen. What is your feeling about the future? Your intuition, let's put it that way.
Yeah, like we say sometimes in America, my vibe. I'll give you my vibe. My vibe is entirely positive. I think it's a great development. I think it's highly democratizing. We are not without risks, but the risks I see are in attempting to control the beast, okay? To have centralized control of AI. But I think in the end, that's going to be rather a futile effort because in addition to sort of the dynamics within a nation state, such as the United States, where, potential entrants will find ways to get in spite of the efforts of incumbents to keep them out and so on. There's also international competition. So China is sort of an obvious example. Europe, I would like to see become a viable a contender in the world of AI. But then don't forget about places like, especially as cost of calculation and everything falling, as the cost of generating a trained LLM go down. Don't forget about places like Argentina, where they seem like they're going to actually continue on the path of increasing openness of their system, which would encourage innovative entrepreneurs to give it a go, as they say, or Africa, which is coming up and I suspect may be a source of new innovative thinking, pitting itself somewhat against the existing superpowers and the existing cultural hegemons. Okay, so I think in the end, efforts to control and restrict and run AI by governments will fail. And I think we're going to have a more democratic system. AI is like the printing press, right? We're living in the early post-Gutenberg years. And after Gutenberg, people were complaining, oh, this is terrible. We can't have this. Look, just anybody can write this so-called book and say anything they want in it, and people will read it and believe it. We can't have that. Well, yeah, we can have that. In fact, that's in spite of the fact that is a phenomenon that happened. Of course, it's true. People read foolish books that are utter rubbish and whose authors knew they were utter rubbish and they believe it, right? That's a terrible thing. It's bad. It happens. And yet, in spite of that, the great democratization brought on by the printing press, by the modern book, improved knowledge flows, improved the knowledge of regular people, made us, smarter and better, and not more, stupid or enslaved to liars. Okay? So that's kind of my vibe. That's my vibe.
On the other hand, there's also the problem of, if you, like as a programmer, you have ChatGPT do your programming for you with vibe coding, in effect, you lose competency. It's like giving somebody a wheelchair so they don't have to walk anymore, even though they could walk if they wanted to. Gradually, they lose the power of their legs. Now, that's one of the dangers of AI.
Well, sure, but I would view that as a danger comparable to the dangers of alcoholic beverages. Okay? Alcohol's the science on this seems to be, all over the place. But as far as I can figure out, moderate consumption of alcohol is probably actually good for your health. That's consistent with the idea that cities were made possible by beer and wine, which enabled people to hydrate without, drinking dangerous polluted water. So So sure, if you become a drunk, that's terrible. It's a bad thing. You shouldn't become a drunk. That's bad for you. It's bad for your family. It's a terrible thing. But prohibiting alcohol, it turned out to produce worse problems than any that it solved, and didn't address actually the problem of alcohol. Didn't abort the problem of alcohol consumption at all, and so it becomes a problem of each individual and household needing to be prudent. Okay? I think that's kind of the analogy.
I guess I would counter that with maybe thinking about the end of the Roman Empire, where everybody sits back, has their slaves, and gradually deteriorates. That would be. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that in a world where we have artificial intelligence, it's a tool. If you want to use the tool well, you can't switch off your brain. On the contrary, right? I mean, and sometimes you think Claude is a genius, and then 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, Claude doesn't understand anything, right? And 5 minutes after that, it's a ridiculous hallucination, right? So you have to know how to use the tool.
Yeah, but most people will not know. They will be used by it.
The people who do know how to use the tool will have more success than those who don't. So that gives everybody an incentive to learn how to use the tool. Okay? So it's sure if our schools, are have as part of the program sort of how to use that tool properly, good. Okay. But the results will speak for themselves. Okay? Those who merely trust the AI will have less success. Those who challenge the AI and use it as a fallible tool will have more success. Okay?
May I interject? I think the problem maybe is that it may not even be a tool in the traditional sense of being used. It may be you are the being used instead of the tool. The tool is using you rather than the other way around. It's not just a tool. It's something. That's one thing about AI. It seems to be much more than a tool.
Well,
it's a mind.
But sorry, we are saying similar things. I remember in the last 60, 70 years about everything, about cars, about robots, about, it is, let me say, it is very British. You turn it around, you say, it enslaves me. So I don't think that this is a problem. I think some of the political reflections that Roger was making on the medium powers, this can be very important for a future international competence.
Yeah.
Or competitions. So because I trust a lot on markets. I think the experience, I am very much influenced by the experience in my country. My country markets work pretty well, but the government, the hierarchy, the concentrated power of the hierarchy is terrible. It's very destructive. And we see now in the States the same problem. A terrible hierarchy is creating havoc almost everywhere.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with much of what Roger is saying. I'm just saying, it's maybe not, the tool analogy may not be the accurate analogy, and we may be in for some surprises.
That's a highly suggestive remark. So I'll try to, let that one incubate. I have to confess it hasn't dampened my optimism, though. Learning to control and even start fire was a big event in the hominin, evolution. With the result that we started pre-digesting our food by cooking it, to the point where now we depend on cooking. Right? So if something similar happens with AI, I think that's okay. I think that's all right.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about you, Eric? Are you, what's your vibe? Are you a techno pessimist, or are you?
No, actually, I'm an optimist. It helps me every day. It speeds up what I'm doing, and the discussions I'm having with it. I think that the interesting thing about these LLMs, if they're good, they match your style of expertise. You can go to any level. And I was talking philosophy, logic,
Yeah.
computer science, genomics, all at a very high level, and the darn thing understands in a way that most people wouldn't be able to follow me. And so it's fascinating, the mental capacities of these things, just amazing. And of course, it makes you tremendously productive.
Mhm. Okay, we have a question by Casimir. We after that we can close because it is 90 minutes.
Thank you. I want to return you to reality and to point what is happened now in Moscow. If you have great possibilities and knowledge to use artificial intelligence, but if you have no internet, you really die.
Mm-hmm.
Now in Moscow, there is no internet.
Mm.
So we depend very, very closely to such possibilities. Our life now is in dangerous because alcohol I may prepare at home, but internet I could not.
Mm-hmm.
And this connectedness of the world is very important. And you see now in Moscow, they stop internet, no banking, no usual work. What we will do with such case? Many artificial intelligence systems are in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
If the connection between Europe and United States is broken, which is very easy to be done, what will happen? This is very, very dangerous situation. We enter in the absolutely new world where everybody depends of such possibilities. Thank you.
We're not without dangers in the world. That's true. That's true. But there is an open question: how sort of robust and resilient is the global system? I stay on the side of the optimist, but that optimism doesn't mean that terrible things can't happen. I mean, if Steven Pinker's got his numbers right, why the probability of violent death has been declining since, literally caveman days, or at least since the onset of so-called civilization. But that doesn't mean that the horrors of the 20th century didn't happen. They did, and they were horrors, and it was bad. Or again, there's an argument that I think is right, that the so-called socialist planning just isn't going to deliver the way so-called capitalism does. So much so that the Soviet Union was always doomed. Okay, great, it was doomed, but it took 70 years for that doom to finally, extinguish the empire. So I remain the optimist, but I appreciate the admonition that this doesn't mean very bad things can't happen. Very bad things can happen, and it matters very much.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Maybe we are close to finish the session. And if you find good idea to explore with Marcos, with Hector Fanil, and yourself, Roger.
That sounds like a great idea.
Interesting discussion on the ecosystem of control of AI.
Yeah, that might be a good idea. Let's talk about that.
I will send to you for I will try to find the link of this because I printed it, but I think I dropped the source.
And thank you for your excellent presentation, Roger, and for your contribution. I mean, your lifetime of contribution is just amazing.
Very nice contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
It was great pleasure.
It was a joy for me to be here, participate in this forum. Thank you so much for having me, for your comments, Eric. It's fabulous.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.